Hi, and welcome to today at Continental Search. Today I'm interviewing Jim Hipskind, the swine and poultry recruiter here at Continental Search. Our topic for today, resumes and personal value propositions. Jim, you wanted to talk about personal value propositions. That's a big fancy term, but what do you mean and what is a value proposition?
Dan, when we're preparing our candidates for an interview, or even when we're making initial contact with a candidate that we may be working with, it's important that we understand what their value proposition is. That's kind of a new term that we've coined here recently. A lot of people have heard it referred to as their 30-second elevator speech, which has been pretty common for years. But basically what a value proposition is, Dan, it's the answer to this question: why should we hire you? Your value proposition needs to contain those things that are going to entice a prospective employer to give you serious consideration for the position that they're interviewing for. As is the case with just about any of us that have been involved with any kind of capital project during our career, we understand that the need to justify the capital expenditure required for that project has to be dealt with. The same is the case in any staffing investment by any prospective employer. They want to know if they're going to be able to get the return on their staffing investment by hiring you for a particular position. Many companies will evaluate that or calculate that as a multiple of your base salary. So, for example, if you're making $100,000 a year and their multiple is between 3 and 5, they're going to be looking for cost savings or revenue generation in the $300,000 to $500,000 a year range. That's every year. So, does your resume point out to a prospective employer that you in fact have those kinds of skills and abilities and can demonstrate the kinds of return that they're going to be looking for? The most significant of these returns that you've been able to provide for previous employers is then going to be incorporated into your value proposition. Now, the value proposition is going to be dealt with entirely through your entire process once you decide that you're going to start looking for another position. If you're dealing with a recruiter, you need to be able to make sure that they understand what your value proposition is. The key here, Dan, is consistency of message. The recruiter needs to be able to convey to a prospective employer what your value proposition is. That employer is probably going to request to see a copy of your resume. The information supporting your value proposition needs to be very well documented in your resume. And then when they bring you in for an interview, your value proposition also has to coincide with what the recruiters talked about, what's in your resume, and what you started off as your own value proposition.
How would I go and incorporate that into my resume if I wanted to?
Well, the best thing to do, Dan, is like we mentioned here a little bit earlier. Each one of us has duties and responsibilities that we are entrusted to in each position that we have. And the basic theme that we deal with today, and I think most people would agree with this, is everybody wants to know, what are you going to be able to do for us in this new position? Our philosophy is that the best indicator of future performance is past performance. So if you've had the kinds of successes and can document those accomplishments that are going to lead a prospective employer to believe that you have the experience and the accomplishments that you have been able to provide for previous employers, then you've got a much better shot at being able to convince that employer that you have those skills and abilities to do their job. One of the things that we make sure our candidates are aware of when they go into an interview is this idea that you've had the ability to do this for previous employers and you can do this for them. And cite the examples of why you say that.
Jim, you've given us a lot of great information today. Tell me, how could someone get in touch with you if they wanted to know more?
Well, the two best ways to get a hold of me, Dan, number one is through my toll-free number, which is 800-799-4520. Or you can send me a message at jim@consearch.com. That's Jim at consearch.com.